Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is the third event of National Poetry Month 2016 for the Otter Creek Poets. The previous two events exist as wonderful videos, and this one will too. If I haven't sent the video to you, I will, of Chard and of Lori from last week. Today we have two poets, one who's driving in from New York City, so won't be here till 2-ish, I think. This is Aneleisa Gladding-Hinton. Not Aneleisa, Aneleisa. Right?
Aneleisa.
Aneleisa, who is a senior at the college. Karen, every year I ask Karen Gottschall who you got for talented young undergraduate poets, and this is who she mentioned this time. I won't say much more except to let you read, and then read for a while, maybe have some questions and answers, and read a little bit more. Anything else we need to say? So John Vincent is here with it's Poem in Your Pocket Day. No one knows who invented this, but he has gone to his little letterpress and printed poems for you to take and put in your pocket or wherever. This
Printed
is
500, so I'd like to.
Okay. Letterpress printing is the original printing. It's 500 and how many years now? 530 years old now.
You gave me my start in letterpress printing.
I did.
A lot of people don't know that.
Okay.
He's older than he looks.
That's right.
500 years.
500 But it's how books were printed before there was Kindle, so, and everything else. That's all. Read poems and we'll talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Can everyone hear? If you can't hear, say so, and we'll put on the extra mic.
So, I'm going to read some poems that are part of the creative thesis that I submitted last fall. Very exciting to do that. And I don't think there's anything I really need to tell you. The title of the collection is Figures in Stillness and Motion, which is maybe a useful way in. It is for me. So I'm going to start with a little triptych here. And forgive me for my mispronunciation of these Latin names. 1. Botaurus lentinosus. Vessel-shaped bittern sways the reeds, opens her throat to the winds. Liquid and ancient and dark as starlight, her cry ripples night water. 2. Long-necked jar, Chinese Neolithic period. Black eddies terracotta about her neck, curving threads to space, for hands to lift, and held liquid pours from clay banks. The river's flow is worn dark brown, slip lines, waves that lap her foot and belly, wash her shoulders, wet her lip. 3. Ardea Herodias. Before the falling froth of silt and air and afternoon sun and the occasional stunned fish, the heron stills, a single blue moment awaiting, coil of neck, leg, wing, her span, improbable in shards of sky. Now, this is a series within the greater collection, and the series is called Songs for Lyra. And
Songs for whom?
For Lyra.
Lyra, thank you.
And I begin it with a quote from Deborah Fraser's On the Day You Were Born, which is a wonderful children's book that I kind of grew up with. And the quote is, a circle of people singing with voices familiar and clear. One, in your sweet dawn, you became, as March snow whitens to melt fog, as ice and mud braid to tractor road, behind bleary maples, a silent house, as wood fire steams sap to gold. In that dawn of your becoming, the apple tree sidled, bare through the fields hazed with waking and melting sugar steam, arched off sugar house tin, and your waiting came to be. As suddenly expected, as tidal, as mist over sun, over maple sap, a rousing, unseen, as barely conceived, your first cellular moment was already a waiting, some same sweet rising. Two, red, as wood fire and maple blossom, flaming her favorite color, coursing through her barely mama, drying blood and taking pulses she nurses while your heart beats her own blood's pulse faster, bird like the chickadee she held, whose beak was bloodied with flight and the unyielding windows, trees, whose flutter pulse was faint. It all goes red, the white sanitary walls fall in, she bruises easily. Her knees to the tile, your little sea flushing crimson, still your heart on the monitor, steady. She tries to count your days, your chances, your 50-50 gamble. You are already queen of so many hearts. This leaky, salty, acrid worry, red as chance, as geranium flowering, and leaves sour-scented on her hands. The late spring, chilled house flamed with houseplants, and wood stove red glow of all she can do is echo your heartbeat. Uncertainty, your red pool waiting on the sweet chance of June, when she picks wild strawberries, each surprise heart no bigger than you, her surprise hiding under a whiskered leaf. The smell of strawberry sun and sawdust. For all of it, for you, she now is waiting. Three, nesting, as in bittersweet, as in your vined and woody twisting. Through this waiting mother, your mother, her hands and face are young with expectation and unknown. Your sleepy tangling through her chambers as she through yours, where, like housefinch and her flotsam weavings, she sews stencil vines to your window, drapes the frame in frays of lace with French knot berries scattered orange and vermilion. Little curled seed of a bittersweet tale, she's spinning you out into that golden toss of wood and thorn and vine. There, mid-October sun sinks to sapling thickets constellated in empty nests, all waiting for their full orb of snow candled by low light, as now your mama's rounding her fair fall of hair aureoled. In this, sun's last slendering across white pines and frost field, across your room wavering in seams of dust motes, that very waiting lingers. when your 8th early moon hangs like a paper coin in whitening sycamore arms, and the windowed sky plunges to dusk's blue, you turn against the banks of your tight pool as the brook trout curls into her own rippled shadow. You turn in upon yourself liquidly, shapely as the potter's spun clay, as this mother, as her bones and ligaments and muscles, woven vessel, within you are cupped in a tiny sea of night. Your face is unknown, already familiar as every new moon. She waits in twilight's slip into night, over windows filling to rectangles of gold, for you, behind one, are turning. Five. Stargazer. Lily, your hands open to moonlight, your irises crescent, mirrored stars. Your mouth fills with pearled names, Hercules, Draco, Cepheus. Down here on this tiny, spinning planet, your mama's arms are sure as Orpheus's music, as cradled his harp, the spangled eagle. She bows her head. Listen. Alter, Deneb, your Vega, your luminescent eyes, your mouth open. She's feeding you a milky song of stars. And I'll just read one more. This one's called Mama, Memory. Your fingertips combed Saturday mornings through wet hair, borrowing remembers, as we did each from our mother before we outgrew her sweaters, her shoes still fit, her silver shoes. There, no face so like home is. Barely older yours, as like mine as you, reflected, asymmetric, through dark glass, aging color prints of gold October, your hair grown out. I cut mine short to curl, like yours hued and curved as leaves in fall. Bared winter, now you grow out to cloud gray. Thank you.
Thoughts, questions? She can't get away now, so. How did you come to
Stop.
poetry? How long have you been doing it?
Oh, God. How could I escape it? Both my parents are poets. So, I don't know, they have little, pieces of notepaper where I made up little poems and songs that I don't even remember making up.
Did they encourage you in it? Because when I think of telling my kids what to do with their lives, I would think, whatever you do, don't be a poet.
Well, that comes up too.
Okay.
Those words are said, but there isn't discouragement either, I think, even as, the jokes are made. So, I don't know, I think it's just something, I don't know, it's a little bit like being bilingual, maybe. It's like you can't help it, but you have this other language, and sometimes it just comes out.
They're both translators as well. Do you do any of that?
Yes. I have translated. I don't see it necessarily as a vocation.
Now, you're also a visual arts major, a studio arts major?
Yes, yeah.
And does that Do they play off of each other, the poetry
They
and
have.
the art?
Yeah, the way Middlebury College's joint majors work, you have kind of your culminating senior work combines both disciplines, and so last semester I was able to do visual work that interacted with the poems some of the poems that you heard today, actually. And that's a really fascinating interaction to me. It kind of starts with the dilemma of visual art's problem with illustration, seeing it as kind of a craft and something not to be taken seriously. And for me, develops into a very different angle of approaching the same content, and very much just a different language to be dealing in.
Were you able to hold on to the same concept as you did the visual art, or did it change?
Yeah, actually quite closely, surprisingly so. And I think it's because I had a lot of conversations with Karen about this. I start from a place of images rather than necessarily words. And so...
In your poetry, you were talking about.
Yeah, creatively in general. I start from a very visual place. Sometimes it's, a turn of phrase that ignites. But I usually do start at the visual place. So kind of, it is actually a matter of translation that it either translates into words or the visual. And it's really interesting to have it translate into both, because you start to kind of see how that first kind of embryonic image grows into these two very different things. They kind of shed light on each other, which is something that I'm really interested in still. Yeah.
What sort of images went with the long poem to the embryo?
I did a series of little books with translucent vellum paper, and I don't have them in Middlebury. I would have brought them otherwise, but it's about 4 pages small, with the text typed with a typewriter on, let's see, the inside of the first page, and then a cutout of kind of the shape of a fetus, which actually, if you look at just the outline, it's a very beautiful abstract shape. You wouldn't necessarily identify it as what it is. So a cutout on the second page, and then on the page after that, a painting in gouache. So there's a sense you can look through the pamphlet, especially if you have it up against light, because it's translucent, you can see through the text, through the cutout, and then through to this painting at the back, or you can turn it and kind of see through those layers the other way. And I had a lot of fun displaying them on a light table, so you have the light from underneath, and it's really fun to kind of flip through and see the different ways these layers can interact.
I spoke with your mother years ago over in Montpelier, just after she had published Stonecrop, her first book of poems, which I loved and read over and over and over again. And what have you learned while living with your mother all these years and reading her work? What have you learned from her about poetry and writing poetry?
What haven't I learned from her? I don't know, it's funny that you mentioned Stonecrop. We make jokes kind of about how I was born pretty much the same year that Stonecrop came into being.
Right? Oh, yeah.
There's some great pictures from when she went around doing readings right after it had been published. The book on one knee and me on the other.
Both were babies.
Yeah, exactly. I think the place that, let's see, I don't know even where to start answering this question. I really mean it when I say, what haven't I learned from her?
Right.
I think she has this perspective on the world around her, the small world, not the big conceptual world. and how that can become, something more than just, writing about pretty nature or writing about, oh, my little petty experience. It turns into something somehow very, very small but very big at the same time. There's something other about it, maybe. It's something very, very hard to talk about exactly, but I mean, her poems are some of my favorite poems as well. And I think that they give me a model for something that I see in her poems it is possible to do, and I can then do in my own way in my own poems. And I think more generally just, being around her, going out for a walk with her and seeing what she points out. I think she has a poem about teaching me bird calls or the names of the birds or something like that. I should know that better. But that kind of, I have all of this knowledge that has just kind of been there for me throughout my life with her. And that's kind of a bedrock off of which I really build my poems. That was a long answer. Anyone else?
Do you sometimes do your art and then write a poem about it after, or is it more the other way around?
It has gone both ways. I think kind of arbitrarily it tends to start with the writing, but I do think that's arbitrary. Last semester, I'm a college student, so I end up being in this world of deadlines. We were talking about this. And sometimes that's great, but it also meant that I was, producing poems as quickly as possible, which meant that I had a lot of material to jump off from with the visual, so that kind of necessarily followed. But that said, actually, of the first 3 poems that I read for you guys, at least the second one and maybe the third one was first an image and then a poem. So it does go both ways.
Do you hope to make a career as both after college?
I don't think so. I actually, this is, such a question.
Yeah, I know. I probably shouldn't have asked.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's one I'm asking all the time. And I, at this point, have come around to the conclusion that I'm a lot more interested in living a rich life in the world and letting whatever kind of creative expression comes out of that come out on the side, but I don't think I want to try to make a life around the creative. But I think that's, who knows, that may change.
Wallace Stevens, a banker.
Yeah, exactly. I was just talking with someone about this recently and kind of thinking through all of these poets that I know of who had incredibly, there's a Greek poet, and his name's escaping me right now, but he was some kind of high government official and, worked 10-hour days or even longer his entire working life, and then wrote these poems that are beloved in Greece, late at night or early in the morning or whenever he had that little bit of free time. And I think that there's some kind of, depth or genuineness that comes out of that. Some people talk about it as like a need to write, but I think it can also just be, whatever it is for the person in question.
There's a lot of question about whether the fact that so many of our poets live in creative writing universe is good for poetry or bad. There have always been people who've been on one side or the other. Joseph Addison, that this county was named for, was a poet and writer and politician, and worked for the king in the colonial government. Wallace Stevens is one everybody mentions. Dana Gioia has been, I think, the head of the Humanities Council. And that's not in creative writing world in the same way that being a professor of writing is.
Yeah. Olga Brumas, that made her living as a physical therapist, I think.
Mm-hmm.
a massage therapist.
I knew her when she was a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania.
And I don't think Ted Kooser was in the university world either, was he?
Also in insurance, I think.
Yeah, he was in insurance. That's right. I can't think of anything worse than insurance.
This is probably a question you get a lot, but who are you reading now, or who have you been reading recently, in terms of poetry?
Let's
These
see.
could even be names that Karen has signed or something.
I haven't been reading that much poetry lately, actually. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I just read Anne Carson's The Beauty of the Husband, which is technically a fictional essay, but it is equally, you could equally call it poetry. I love Anne Carson. I have to kind of turn her around and weigh her for a very long time before I can really know where to go with her. But I also most recently read, it's a novel, but I think in surprising ways it's extremely poetic, by John Crowley. It's called Little Big. And it completely took me by surprise and made me kind of rethink how sort of the poetic fluidity and prose can interact. And I always come back to Merwin specifically. Yeah. The Vixen is the book that I always have that, and if I kind of need a recalibration, that's where I go back to.
Just to pass on a compliment for your father, I have a friend who has led over 200 trips to China, and she absolutely adores his translations.
I will pass that along.
She knows some Chinese, doesn't claim to be fluid, but fluent.
When I was in college, I think when most of us were, creative writing wasn't as big a deal. There was one creative writing course at my college. Richard Wilbur taught it, which was a plus, but you couldn't major in it. You couldn't have 6. You had 1.
Couldn't do your thesis in it either.
No, well, I did actually do my thesis in it, but it was an odd thing to do. It wasn't what English majors did. But Middlebury is pretty geared up for the whole creative world. How many different kinds of creative writing classes did you have, or did you have multiple ones with Karen?
Yeah, I did. There's really, in terms of poetry, there's really only introduction and then advanced workshop, which you can take multiple times if you're taking it with different professors. So I took introduction and advanced with Karen, and then I went back and did the advanced workshop with Jay Perini as well. And also did fiction with Catherine Kramer, who's quite wonderful. I'm actually working with her right now in an independent study.
You writing fiction?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
You get writer's block?
Don't we all? Yes, I do.
Is there any special way you deal with it?
Reading, I think, and patience. I mean, deadlines help a little bit with that because you kind of just have to, at the last minute, you just have to get something down on paper. It doesn't always come out the way you wanted it to, but it does. Contrary to what I'd like to believe, that does actually help me. But really, I don't know. Again and again, I realize that just sometimes you have to be patient. Sometimes you have to wait for some shift to happen somewhere. And then it happens. But in the meantime, it feels like a really, really long wait.
Well, I heard Jay speak last week, and he said, dealing with writer's block, lower your standards. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, that's interesting, but if that's his means for moving forward and then getting to it.
Yeah, it's a way to get things flowing.
And he's one of the most productive writers you'll ever meet. I mean, he
That
writes
is certainly
poems every
true.
morning and novels and critiques
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all sorts of things.
Do you find that reading poetry, when you feel like you're not in the poetry mood or whatever, do you find that reading poetry makes you feel opened up to write yourself?
Sometimes. Other times it's, even more discouraging. I think it can go either way. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's reading really beautifully written prose. Or just that shift that makes things start to move again.
Well, you're a senior now, what are your postgraduate thoughts?
I was just telling David here that I'm moving to Boston in July, and working on finding a job. That's the last piece of the puzzle, and eventually going back to school, maybe, but it's all still working out, settling out.
To be open to whatever comes.
Yeah.
There's certain lots of poetry culture in Cambridge.
That is true.
There's even a poetry bookstore still, I think.
Yeah,
Is it still
yeah.
there? Yeah.
It's right around the corner
Growing
from the
much.
Harvard bookstore. Yeah.
So there's lots of fellow spirits. Trying to think if I was in any good workshop. No, there was one group that met for a while, but wasn't able to find a niche there as far as other people to write with. But I'm sure there are some.
Yeah. Struggle is finding them.
Other thoughts, questions?
I liked your poems very much. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. I would have loved to have been able to read them again in writing. So I'll look forward to your poetry now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Really wonderful to be able to share.
Do you have one more poem you could leave us with?
Yeah.
Encore.
Let's see. Printed this double-sided, and now the pages are all a little bit confused.
The poems about the baby and being born, they're very touching.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness, where is this? Maybe you shouldn't have asked me for an encore.
I'm curious how you choose to put the words on the paper.
That's actually, here we go. That's something I struggle a lot with. For a long time, I just kept everything left aligned and, dealt with line breaks, but didn't deal with any kind of formatting beyond that. Just because I felt like otherwise it was arbitrary. And I'm this actually goes back to your question about how my mother influences me or teaches me about writing, because she has recently been making these really beautiful poems that are kind of a constellation of words across the page, and they have what she calls a through line. It's bold text running through it, and it makes kind of a single line through the poem, but it's constructed in such a way that you can read it more as a web, so you might kind of move across it and put the words together. I kind of jokingly talk about how they're a little bit like, if you've ever seen those poem magnets that you have in the fridge with the words, it's kind of like that. You kind of are moving them together and seeing what, phrases you can make. And there's a really wonderful kind of three-dimensional space and fluidity that kind of format brings out in a way that kind of line by line you just don't get. And so one of my challenges that I set myself while I was writing the poems that I read to you before was trying to let myself not do the same thing that she was doing, obviously, but loosen up and try to find some kind of more spacious form, try to hear that space a little bit more.
That's nicely put.
Thank you.
Hear that space.
All right, so this one is left aligned, actually. In the gardens of the cloisters, dressed in oatmeal linen, you move between 4 quince trees, espaliered pears, and carved columns. A moment nearly caught in illuminator's lines, his imperfect theories of perspective. Here, devotion seems so simple. Feet on warm brick paths, and the scent of rosemary. Simple as the meditator's observing mind, emptying fields of thought. This is New York City we tread to tires muttering over cobbles and distant car horns. Interior dim, cool, with stone damp, there's cloistered here some different age and space of mind. Thoughts as single summer rains on water, each with its cup, splash, ripple, echoing out into banks of cranial bone. Soon, barbed fruits everywhere will be falling from beechwoods and chestnuts, and opening in damp leaf litter. A setting free of seeds as perfect, polished, as wood-lined churches filled with centuries of prayers. And you, I think, would never give yourself to that carved Madonna, her dark form curving at the side door of an alpine church embraced in the mountain beech woods of southern France. Here now all those fallen kernels, a Madonna worn with years of layings on of hands, all these echoes, in museum devotion so simple and yet so full of thorns, giving free to times of giving, fruit from tree to earth, seed from fruit to some other self, as you give now to the care of syringe, to your bitter extractions of you. An offering asked for which there seems no purpose, no season, an offering it seems you shouldn't have to give. As you're stripped of hair, I remember the path here worn, of razor hop vines and yarrow feathers, and surrender, a path simpled to what is. For there opened lungs to breath, with the singular, simple is. Remember, as the quince fruit knots brown through gold, its fragrant flesh was sour also, and grained as wood of chestnuts. Thank you.
I like so much the way you put things, you have wonderful, wonderful phrases, and things that if I were reading it in your book, I would be making little checks or little underlines, and come back and look at this again.
It's almost all
wonderful.
outdoors. You ever read indoors poems?
I have, but they're usually looking out the window.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Bianca's two-ish, and feel free to stay if you want to watch her, or if you've got to get back. But I'm
Goodness.
sure it'll be a good show. Okay. So
Do you
I should
ever
check my
read
phone to see if
poetry about
Bianca's
dreams?
getting in touch.
About dreams? I have. Yeah, that is a wonderful question. It's funny because I was kind of looking through, I was thinking, are there older poems that I want, when I was looking through poems for today, I was looking through older ones and thinking, is there, do I just want to read things from last semester, or do I want to go back a little bit farther? And I came across one that was about a dream. And I really liked, except that the end kind of made me cringe, so I think I need to go back and work on it. But I think do you write poems about dreams?
I just started, and it's really important to me that it's accurate, that really happened, because you're learning something about your life's journey through that. So, but at the same time, you want to make it interesting. to the reader. So I was just curious, because when I wrote the dream, I thought, this is just like a poem. The
They
dream
are.
in and of itself
They
is like
really
the-
are.
I
Yeah.
mean, it didn't need that much work. Because it was already
Yeah, the
poetic.
kind of sympathetic associations or something. The way a dream can kind of slip from one thing to the next without questioning.
In a way, it's a form. I mean, if you read John
Yeah.
Berryman's dream songs, I don't think any of the dream songs really come from dreams, but he uses the format of a dream, which is that you can change the subject at any moment, and uses that to shape the poems.
Oh, what's his name?
John Berryman.
What did you say about John Berry?
That his dream songs, so-called, there's about 400 of them, they partake of dream, but I don't think very many of them are dream reports. They're poems that use the malleability or the changeability of dreams to structure the poem. So it never ends up where it starts. There's not a through line. It's just at any given moment, the scene shifts like in a dream. So.
How do you, when you write your first draft, do you do it in handwriting or do you do it on the computer?
Handwriting.
Or a little piece of paper you have in the car?
I start out handwriting. I feel like everything I've ever tried to start on the computer kind of, I don't know, it's stale in some strange way.
I find that hard to start on the computer too.
Yeah.
Although David Huddle wrote something somewhere about how the computer can enhance your poetry.
I'd be interested to know how. I mean, it does for me too,
But I
maybe,
like to
but
write it by hand.
yeah.
Do you keep notebooks or?
Yeah.
Or do you write them on separate pieces of paper? Or?
I kind of write on whatever I have. I try to keep it all in a notebook, but it kind of spills out. Yeah.
Do you go back and dig amongst the things to see if there's something you might have missed? You could find a few good lines in or something. Like
It's
that.
funny. I only do that when I'm really needing to find a start. I don't do that unless I'm kind of forced to.
Yeah.
But then I go back and think, why don't I do this more often? Because there's a lot of interesting stuff to kind of cannibalize here.
You have so many wonderful phrases that I'm sure that in your notebooks or wherever you write your first pieces, there's probably some little gems there.
They're usually kind of, they would have to be cut. They would have to be mined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the collection of poems for which you won the Ward Prize?
Oh, I almost read one of those poems, actually. I went through them, and all of them I hadn't read them in a year or two. And all of them, I thought, oh, I really like this, except for, this line, or except for this thing.
That happens, you go back and
Yeah,
revise.
yeah. So I think those are due for some revision. It was a fun challenge. That was another kind of, setting myself a challenge. I'm going to do this. And I was in a class on Greek mythology at the time with Maria Hatjigeorgiou, who is a wonderful, wonderful professor at the college. And we were talking a lot about kind of these archetypal stories and how we can kind of map our lives onto them in some way, in some kind of useful way. And so I was kind of taking, the main stories that I was engaging with were Persephone and Demeter, and I dipped a little bit into Theseus and the Minotaur, and kind of seeing how those narratives help kind of crystallize my own family narratives. I was thinking a lot about, in Theseus and the Minotaur, you have this thread kind of going through the labyrinth, and I was thinking a lot about this kind of line drawn through lineage, an umbilical cord even, and kind of going back to my own maternal lineage and tracing through that a little bit, which was, reading them, there's a kind of looseness and expansiveness that I have moved away from, and I don't know why I did. So I think I am going to come back to that. Yeah, it was a really wonderful opportunity that Maria gave me to do that, because it was a final project just for the class, and I said I want to write poems and I want to use this concept that we've been talking about, kind of the real world implications of. Yeah.
Maria met some years ago in our April series to talk about the Greek poet that she's specialized in. I can't remember his name either.
Yeah.
But she gave a great talk about him.
You just listen and listen and listen to her. It's wonderful.
You have a wonderful voice.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I think your poetry is so expressive, and your voice really is beautiful in conveying that. Lovely.
Your poetry is made for your voice.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
That's the idea, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you all.
Thank you, Jen.
You're like a great group of people to share with.
Thank you for your
And I will hang up.
My mom's a single mom, so I ended up spending a lot of time with my grandma too, and just going around with her to poetry readings and stuff like that. Yeah, it was really important to who I am today. So I went on to pursue my own MFA in poetry at NYU. And then while there, I also started getting a chance to incorporate my images more into my working life, and doing what I call poetry comics. So they're visual art with poems inside them. I call them comics because comics is the best example of visual art and words coming together, often in a sequential order. So. But I don't feel kind of beholden to the comic book form necessarily. But that's been a huge part of my life too now, separate than just the poems. But so I do a lot of that. And then also, when my grandmother passed away, we started the Ruth Stone Foundation, and that's based in Vermont and Brooklyn. But we're fixing up her house in Goshen, which was like a huge part of her poetry world and life. And she wrote about that house in so many of her poems, and it was so important to her as like a woman writer in her career, because she had to travel around a lot and didn't really know when the next job was going to come, and she had to raise 3 children by herself. So the house really ended up being this haven for her writing. So we're trying to fix it up and make it into a writer's retreat and artist space, so we can have things like this going on up there too. But our new thing is like we're making this anthology of 4 women poets every year, and then they all get to come stay at the house and have a residency as well as have this publication. So you should check this out. We have a few for sale, right, honey? Yeah. And I have a few of the poetry comic books for sale, but only one of my regular books left. All right, so I'm going to read some from the book, and I thought I'd read a bunch of poems that kind of reference Vermont. It just haunts my poems now that I've left it. This is called The Future is Here. Man burns at a certain degree, but I was burned a little slower. When I went into school, I left a trail of blackened footprints to my classroom of spelling words, never starred. At the end of the earth, we'll be locked in our own spelling mistakes, our arms around the legs of our mother so she won't leave, our heads filled with beer, the light receding. What kind of death is reserved for me? The green plastic soldier has his gun up against everything. And what does one do with a gun, really? I've only held 3 in my entire life. The 3rd I held was the first I used. I was with Rebecca and her father deep in the woods of Vermont when she was staying with me in the heap. I shot at a beer can until my hands went numb. And I loved her the whole time. The car accidents and barbiturates, the way she got wasted, knocked her teeth into her lap and told me I loved her too much. What was all that? What man does is build whole universes out of minuscule disasters and educational degrees. I have mine in an enormous envelope 2 feet behind me. My name looks good in gangster font. It makes me want to alight on the thigh of my beloved like a moth, because I know all careful grief comes out from behind the thigh and makes a fist at the gray sky above Brooklyn. The destroyed continue into the snow-filled future shoveling. And love is either perpetually filthy or intermittently lewd. I'm sweeping the entire apartment because it's mine forever. And that's valid too. Domestic eroticisms. The way he gets up out of bed before you and puts on clothes and can't find his keys, all of it. Without parents, without children, without roommates. It feels good to get something back. And the whole feels detrimental and complicated and forever stimulating, which is why we live and why we send out balloons into the atmosphere with notes tied to them that say, nothing bad can touch this life I haven't already imagined. Okay. So here's a poem I wrote coming back from AWP, which you probably know is a big writing conference that happens every year in different states. I don't know why that's important or why I said that, but I always think of it. It's called Reading a Science Article on the Airplane to JFK. Today I flew over the Midwest, filling out a questionnaire on the emotional life of the brain and personal capacity for resilience against despair. I was making a sculpture of my limbic systems in a huge conceptual neurosis. Under the simulated middle-class environment of the fuselage, the snow was falling. And in everyone's skulls, complex regimes went on and on and on. I seek forever the right way to know this, that there are bridges not built in me, that there are areas that do not light up. You're at a party having a conversation with an interesting stranger. You're in a restaurant and the service is bad. You have experienced profound grief. How do you react to this? Down on the ground, your family writhes. Down on the ground, you are surrounded at Starbucks with a terrible glow, and you've seen someone you love with a colossal, complex vehemence die. And it is pinned under glass in perfect condition. It is wrapped around you like old fur. You've looked at the sky until your eyes touch zodiacal fantasies right there in the void. You know this, that the body lays down while the mind bloats on intellectual chaos. And you've just eaten a bag of cinnamon-flavored chips and assessed that if you met a wonderful new person who ran from you in horror, you would fill their space with calculated desolation. Thus you are waking up, having traveled through time. You're looking down at the Statue of Liberty, garden gnome with her arm in the air, her head full of strangers, and you hear crickets lined up, playing their creepy violins, and you want to be good, and you want to be liked, and you want to recover. Elegy with Judy Garland and Refrigerator. Now, whenever I get up out of bed and go into the kitchen, I really take myself back to the field, among the puissant, among the sterile plum trees, to find a door in the ground, my bullet hole in the mountain, my password. I take out my collection of tissue and listen to Judy Garland sing, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," her voice like some wildflower absorbing into the crimped human mind an infinite medium of grief. This human brain that cannot assume the trust position. I stand like a wizard in that field, my hands on fire over where I think the body is. I open the refrigerator, staring at the eggs, each in their styrofoam socket, each dumbly assembled head bowed. I hold in the fridge light, the cold driving over my knees. And I think of the funeral. I think of us all lined up. The chorus of Greeks spat back out into the trees, and I realize grief is only for the past, that it broods on a kind of preservation. Oh my God. That's so meta.
That was that poem.
Yeah, and I realize grief is only for the past, that it broods on a kind of preservation, flaring up like angels at the base of a lamp. That grief walks barefoot eternally in the local Grand Union grocery, filling its basket, stimulated by each regret, that it knows my teenage ghost. I stand looking at the milk, the rack, the maple, and I realize grief wants me to stay a child, negotiating a stream of atoms, picking flowers. Grief wants me in good condition. Grief wants me to remember everything, imperfect, clear. All right. Let's see. Jesus.
Why don't you just turn that thing on, you won't have to listen to it.
Yeah, I actually made that into a video, a poetry video thing.
Yeah.
So this poem's called The People of Distress, and I had this, I was visiting with my mother in Middlebury, and as usual, having to go through a box of old things of mine. And I found this little notebook. I was always making little books out of everything when I was younger. Kids love doing this naturally, so unfortunately gets squashed out in school at some point, but it's such a joy finding them. But I found this one, it was called, I'd written on the cover, The People of Distress. And I was like, what a dark, cool title to come up with as a child. And inside it was all these strange pictures of characters, and it had this little, like, I realized I had been kind of writing what I had read on the backs of people's books. It was like a blurb/bio, but written by me. So it was like Bianca Stone it was really funny, and it went on and on all about, you know, how I'd grown up and everything. But Bianca Stone is a very good writer. I think she loves her mom very much. It's just very. So anyway, I wrote this poem just inspired by that, and kind of excited that I'd kind of come up with a good line so long ago, and I could still use it. The People of Distress. I found a small notebook called The People of Distress. The day I found the notebook was the day I started reading up on the Gnostic Gospels, late at night in Vermont, the laundry rinsed by the thunderstorm, its slow musk behind our ears and our wrists. I'm not sure, but I suspect we have all been given the secret kingdom of God, taking VHS into the shadowy back bedroom, gesturing to black flies and moths banging at the windows that we are mighty and merciless. This is how I sit, a box of old papers between my knees, a warrior beyond death. Nothing comes to us. We work with what is already here. We live at the garrison tinfoiling over half-eaten peaches, while out in the world there are those who believe Jesus never kissed Mary Magdalene on the mouth with his great red pharmaceutical tongue. And there are those whose bodies are perfectly made for erotic positions in the seamless electricity of stark apartments. I'm down at the river gnawing at a sugar maple. I'm down at the local bar sheathing famous drinks into myself, and I see it all. So give me the parables and natural graves, the androgynous hallelujah national forestry of mid-state. Give me the lightning, armament of antique hat pins, and give back all the bad poems, because one day I'll have to answer for them. I'm waiting patiently, reading my early manifesto, which explains I will one day write the people of distress in words, but for now it is all pictures. It ends magnificently. I am 9 now, and it's never been judged, never been typed. I wish I could take the offspring out of the gnarled nests of my life and let them drop. All the luck of the world would let me in, and good people would have me over for endless, bright, bloodshot evenings. The people of distress would get smaller, and the essential classical masterpieces would get bigger, and they would come out, the great tutors, into the cool night breeze, perfect gentlemen, grand madams, to look at the stars of our hemisphere, to recite and nod knowingly that this is how we see things through. This is how all things end. My herd. You kissed me under the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You kissed me in the elephant cage. I said I love you like a clam. I am asking you to touch me here, and possibly pay for my meal. The dumplings are steaming between us. Kiss me over the dumplings. The presents wrapped in newspaper, the past's various pastures I'll never walk again. I dream I am a lawyer in dark blue. You take me at the witness stand. You wed me in the honeysuckle and in the blizzard. My white rhinoceroses are odd-toed. The whole horrendous herd gallops in me. No, when you hold me, you hold us all. Okay. So I may read the title poem here. First I'll read this shorter one. I don't usually read, but it was calling to me. Someone will have to tell you. Someday soon you will let your hair grow and look like everyone else. There will be a kingdom alongside the kingdom, and a Forsythia alongside you. Your mother has walked out of all her pictures into the ether. There's hair in envelopes, and the hair in lockets, and the hair growing in graves. Saints are kneeling over your portrait. The stratocumulus clouds are forming in your chest, fog around your feet. You'll have to listen to the bananas peeling. Listen to your books on tape. Little by little, your face will float away from your other face. Someday you won't know what to eat. Someone will have to tell you. Someone will have to carry you into the backyard so you can hear the Canadian geese rise hysterically from the river. So Someone Else's Wedding Vows was a poem that came out of working as a wedding photographer really briefly. Well, more an assistant to a wedding photographer who was my sister. And I went to 3 weddings in a row in the span of like 2 months. And I'd never really even been to, I think I'd been to 1 wedding before that in my life. And it was just very surreal being at 3 strangers' weddings in a row and having them be so weirdly similar and like very formulaic. And I was kind of like horrified and grossed out by it all. But then there was this part of me that was really touched by it too. I just started dating my now husband actually, so I was feeling some premonitions, I'm sure. But yeah, so this poem kind of came out of that kind of anthropological study of human rituals. Someone Else's Wedding Vows. The rise of Australopithecus, The weird clouds over Long Island at the classic wedding. The crowd frightened of what it means having O'Hara's avocado salad poem read. It's an evil waste of time for me to congratulate anything. Accuracy comes to me, slips out, in fragments of my earlier works recited in the Secret Weapons Defense Committees. I'm president of the clams, seduced by food service, purple squids sinking in their own pitiful mantle, irrevocable among the dinner rolls. I would pay to feel good all the time. But I'm telling stories to the churchless evening, watching lost guests take paper plates to inoffensive tables illuminated with Greta Garbo centerpieces. Bring me to the oak out front and tell me you love me, I say to the family dog. The pool is lit with unscented candles. Hillary stands on a chair. We're taking the wedding photographs, practicing someone else's dutiful permanence. Clusters of sequin at the bar. A hand reaches around a white waist and considers literature for the first time in months. This is the sea that arranges inside us, the burning ship that drifts with its burning, anxious crew. This is a colder evening in September. The sun drapes its modern dread across everything. The front lawn has never had its chance with violent, unkempt beauty, but something dark stirs in the incipient mums. I want to embrace whatever is firmer and bigger than myself, like the sound of the wind around the tent, or everyone inventing their own colloquial happiness, acting out, too bored or wired with rancor to stop eating. And it's true, I spent my whole life in fear of sharing my mind, but with a longing for it to be taken. Year after year, I could not even order myself to be touched. I became a waitress who looked sad, dropping occasionally into the bed of a maniac who looked sadder and meaner. And I should have gone out into the field every night to watch black bears growl in honeysuckle, or absorbed myself in the essays of Empson, which I never finished. I'm still somewhere in the mountains of Vermont, exhibiting relatively high intelligence. Somewhere I'm communicating, and where it's driest, I sit down with my wet drink. I drink for the incidental, the heart of dust, for my family and all their uneven moods, for this audience of discreet psychotics posing for photographs, for the living deer ravaging gardens, for the touch of sub-shrubs, lavender, periwinkle, and thyme, touching the lingering otherness, for this not being known, rarely knowing, and for the ordinary, monstrous knowing I love. How's everybody doing? Are we happy? Are we calmed out? All right. Yes. I've read enough from my book that I want to die every time I open it. But I thought I'd read. I'm feeling like he's a little too dark. Okay. They're dark, but very darkly humorous. So it's okay to laugh. I've been reading a lot of kind of elegies. I have become very interested in the elegy form, and after my grandmother died, I started imagining her. Well, first of all, she had this great poem called The Mobius Strip of Grief. And I thought that was such an amazing title because it really nails it. It's just like sometimes it just goes on and on and on. She had a lot of grief in her life because her husband committed suicide very early when my mom was just a child. So I think she really took on that death and never let it go. And that grief was really passed down to the daughters and then to the children of the daughters. So her death brought on this other level of grief, too, and it just felt like, I don't know, I started thinking about just the perpetualness of grief. But then also, I started imagining the Mobius strip club of grief, where maybe all of our loved ones that we've lost are now working it. And I don't know, I just think of it as almost like a alternate reality of where we can go to, it's like an alternate reality where we can kind of go work through it or confront it or something. Anyway, so this is called Working Afterlife. There's a few of these poems. Working Afterlife. At the Mobius Strip Club of Grief, come on in, the ladies are XXX. If you want the skinny ones, we've got skeletons crackling around the poles. Over there at the bar, there's Bertha with her breasts that hang to her stomach, gorgeous with a shaken drink and murderous with a maxi pad. At the Mobius Strip Club of Grief, all the drinks are free. Grandma's grocery store rosé in gallon bottles on every table. And the dead don't want your tips. They just want you to listen to their poems. Don't do anything potentially dangerous. Call every once in a while. In fact, they tip you at the Mobius Strip Club of Grief with checks. With a sigh, they'll throw one down at your feet. We make it rain with checks, they say. Wait until next Monday to cash. Then the dead are sitting down in the back of the club, dying further, sniffing, shuffling into the bathrooms, holding their skin in their hands, farting methane and sobbing across the stage with their last meal. It's the raciest show in town. And ladies, there's men too, hanging themselves on the bathroom doors and from the rafters, totally naked, with their cocks in their hands, tears coming down their faces. Ladies, you'll love how their feet smell, how their bones protrude, how they leave no notes. The Mobius Strip Club of Grief gets honeybeed. The Mobius Strip Club of Grief gets honeybeed. I don't know, are you ready for this? This is a big one. It's all true. When the male enters a female honeybee and manages climax, his genitals explode and break off his body. It's the most dedicated orgasm in the universe. His penis stoppers her like Ali Baba's boulder at the entryway to a cave of treasure. She's sealed with a spell. Having let loose their tragic progeny and prevented another from entering her, the male bleeds out and dies in the grass. This really happens. So it is at the Mobius Strip Club of Grief. Off hours, the dead wait at the center of the room, sitting backwards in chairs, lounging in tassels, reading goodbye letters that have been tucked into the casket. The disco ball at the center of the room is like a flamboyant pockmarked moon, spinning silver acne over the dancing dead. The pollen is aching. When it's time, the competition is fierce here in the air. 25,000 males assemble and compete for a single deadly orgasm. Progeny is everything at the Mobius Strip Club of Grief. Our motto is, I'd rather be dead than share you with another. I've been reading this book about the sex life of insects and animals, and it's truly disturbing and fascinating. Lap dance. It's the last one of these, so don't worry. I think everyone's glad I'm dead, said the stripper with the caved-in face. Her fingers were bone and no sinew. She flapped her arms at the two wrens caught up in the rafters, staring down into the empty dance hall at the Mobius strip club of grief. Tiny chirps rained down like sparks from an electric saw in their little hearts. No one is glad anyone is dead, but there's a certain comfort in knowing that the dead can entertain us if we wish. We line up outside looking drowned, telling whoever comes our way that we are falling very fast and that we are fine. The dead are wrinkled as jet streams cutting across the room with their glasses on their heads. They keep it cold inside so no one can smell their breath. Their hair is still growing. It doesn't stop, crackling out of their skulls in animated gray. And we file in ones and twos, clinging to our tragedies, finding our favorite face. And it looks back at us with indifference, contempt, chill disappointment. You never came much when I was alive, says one, laying on her side like a Botticelli on the stage. And now you want a piece? $20 for 5 minutes. I'll hold your hand in my own. I'll tell you you were good to me. I'm going to read one more, and then we can talk, because I want to know what's going on in your life. Yeah, let's not do that. I'm going to end with a poem about birds. I love birds. I'm getting very into it. But they also kind of make me sad. I feel like we're just taking over and they're just struggling along. And I mean, it's really bad in New York. It's just, everybody's so mean about the pigeons and everything. And I'm just like, anyway, thank you for listening to my poems. It's been nice reading them to you. This is called Migration. This time of year, the birds are making their elegant mobs, tragic and sinister almost, in those gathering clouds. It always made me sad to see the one trailing at the end, falling behind, darling tail end, tripping up like a foot of a musical note, dark dot making swirls over and around the obscene billboards and grim buildings, gathering on the empty streets like relentless matching ornaments, no distinction between them from this distance, their eyes kept from me, their hearts beating blue-red compasses leading to Florida. Isn't it late in the year, I wonder, watching them like a child might watch a father love another child better? Shouldn't they be gone, and will they smash into a commuter plane or into a sky blue tower? The greatest trick of humans, making the sky into matter. Those little feathery dinosaurs stopping at the mall ponds to drink. Is everything going to be this devastating and only more devastating? This time of year, though, they're calling out to one another and sensing the change in the wind. They're working as a team, and it makes me want to get stoned on the front stoop, lit from within, those migrating jewels, those elegant survivors, feathered delicacies, musical geniuses, flinging like a ballerina made up of smaller ballerinas, those dwindling barrettes of nature. Good God, there's simply nothing more important than them making it. I want to go out to the park at dawn with my binoculars and watch them assembling. I want to know the differences between them, haul my mattress out onto the roof, and forget my cat down in the bedroom. I want to compare them to stars, to light, to pepper. I want to follow them on an old bike down south. Want to do something other than take this exit off the freeway and leave them in my rear view mirror, fumbling clear black angels, backup dancers, flawless, cheerleading squad from some transcended universe, piling up on one another perfectly, swallowing the sky like a silk scarf, above, silent, powerful, better than me in every way, hustling over the shipwrecked world. Thank you so much. Yeah.
What was the name of the poem that your grandmother, the blah, 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 grief?
Oh, the Mobius strip of grief.
Oh, that was the name of her poem. And then
Yeah, mine's just has club in it.
Did you ever consider an alternate career, or was it poet from day one?
Well, I always knew I'd write poetry, but I considered, I thought I was really into music for a while, and I seriously considered doing that for a long time. And then when I was in college, I studied literature, and I considered being a scholar, but I hated writing papers, and I much would rather write poems. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much always knew I wanted to do poetry as my career, or visual art. Some art, I really always wanted to live by my art. And I've managed to make it work somehow.
Even your darkest poems are funny.
Good,
Is that-
really? Some people say I'm funny, and other people I feel like I feel like I'm never funny. I feel like I'm like, other
Oh, no,
people
it's
are
like
so much funnier.
There's not hardly a line without something that is a zinger.
Get, but I mean, yeah. I think humor on some level at all times is important. I mean, not taking everything so seriously as a poet helps talk about really hard things. I don't know. I mean, but it's hard to try and be funny. I know, because I feel like I don't write really funny poems. Like some of my friends write very funny poems. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it just helps talk about heavy themes and makes it enjoyable to listen to for people. And
You've incorporated, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just how nice that you're thinking of your audience.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of poets don't.
yeah, I mean, it's a really tough call because you don't want to overthink of your audience,
No.
but you don't want to pretend like it's not for them.
They don't exist.
Yeah, I mean, poetry is such a gift for other people, and it's not really, in the end, it's not really for you anymore because you're going to die, and hopefully your poetry is going to continue on and speak to other people, and you're not always there. You know, your poetry is out without you.
Well, when it's published, it's out in the world.
Yeah, yeah, but you don't want to. It's hard to get stuck in a place where you want to write to be published. So it's always this fine line between thinking about your audience and writing it just for the sake of writing it. You know.
But isn't that always the case with an art form?
Yeah, I think so. But it's easy to forget that. Yeah.
And the bird poem.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
That was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Give us an encore, maybe reading the bird poem again?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You bring in both New York City and rural Vermont in your poems?
Yeah.
And does that happen when you're in those locations, or when how does that happen?
Yeah.
It's so different, I can see.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's like easier to write about a place when you're not in it. I've found that a lot, but especially with Vermont. Although I really want that to change because I'm going to be coming here so much more frequently. I want to do my writing here more. But yeah, I mean, I do a lot of gazing out at what's around me and writing about it, like in the moment. So my apartment is always coming up, and things that are like right outside the window are always coming up. But I think our memory is so wrapped up in our inspiration and our kind of longing for a place that defines us, ends up being so important in our work, that Vermont comes up a lot. I mean, I think I feel my poetry was born here, and my voice was born here, so part of me exists here, and it comes up so much in my poems. I mean, I don't write about Ohio, for instance, where I lived for 4 years for college, you know. There's certain places that just, I don't know, they're just your poetry places. But yeah, sometimes you have to leave a place to write about it. You just can't do it when you're there. You're just too in it.
Are you teaching at all at the?
Yeah, I work for a poet as a personal assistant, and I teach at a place called Brooklyn Poets. And it's great because I get to design my own classes, and they're always capped at 11 people, 10 to 11 people. And so we get a lot of time to like work really closely, and we work in my apartment, so it's fun. Like, they just get to see my space and everything. And right now I have a group of all women, so that's really great too. And I love it. I love it. I love thinking about all the different ways to workshop. This time around, I've been thinking about it a lot because I feel like there's always problems with the workshop models that I'm always trying to like modify or find different ways to talk about people's poems and like be the most helpful to people or something. Like I want people to get as much as they can out of a workshop, and also to be really inspired by other people's poems and different ways of thinking about inspiration. So we talk a lot about different ways to be inspired and get outside of your one little zone of how you write, which is good for all of us to constantly be checking in on. Yeah.
Do you get prompts and exercises, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we do like some in-class writing. Mostly I focus on like forms, like ekphrastic form, which is writing about art, and really kind of expanding that idea. So I'll have them talk a lot about their own obsessions in their life, write them down, and they can write an ekphrastic poem about something that's maybe not a painting, just something that they're obsessed with. Or I just had them do a poem with awe in it, because I've been thinking a lot about the phenomenon of awe and how it gets you out of yourself, your own rumination. And so, yeah, things like that, assignments like that.
I've given hundreds of prompts. Some of them get ignored, some of them work. And there's always been a few that are absolutely surefire, never fail.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those? You have a prompt that always works?
No, I mean, they're all, like, I love playing the poetry game, which my grandma always did, which was like everybody gave a different vocabulary word, and then everyone wrote a poem using those words. It's not a surefire prompt because people get too obsessed with the rules. But you should tell me yours.
Oh. You know the Robert Pinsky poem, Shirt.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm not sure I know that one, but...
Well, it's a list poem.
Oh, okay.
All the parts of a shirt, but then he goes off.
Okay, I'm doing the
and
list
defines
next
the
week
shirt.
with them, yeah.
And I show that, and then I have people write a list poem.
I love
And
that, yeah.
People, it always works.
Yeah. No, it's true. The list poem that people do really excel at that.
David, you say it always works. You mean people write poems.
Good
Even
poems?
people who've never written poems before write poems.
That means it works?
Well, they're
I'm only saying because maybe the work is to write good poems.
Well, no, it's not. It's not the work.
Oh,
Just,
I think it
just
is.
writing any poem is the work.
No.
Well, if we were only only achieving writing good poems, we'd all be screwed because...
We are all screwed.
Yeah. I mean, there's like 500 poems, like 200 good poems.
Yeah. Well,
sounds like you customize your prompts to individuals
Well,
instead of just an overall prompt.
no, they're for everybody. They're just kind of based upon specific ideas of inspiration, I guess. I don't cater them to people. I wish I had the time to do that, but you are wanting to say something.
A question I can't tell from listening in terms of the form of your poetry and how you want to see it expressed on the page, and if you give that a lot of thought, or if that's an unrealistic or unnecessary distinction to you.
No, it's so important. I mean, the form on the page, the white space on the page is what makes a poem, is such a huge part of what makes a poem. I myself don't I rarely lock myself into like couplets or tercets. I don't know why, but my poems tend to be like one big piece with somewhat uneven lines. But I think it's, a poem usually knows what it's going to be right away. And I see a lot of my students getting hung up on feeling like they need a form for it to be a real poem. And I think it can be really helpful sometimes if you aren't really sure. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to try couplets, something different. But it can really make or break a poem, I think. And just you want it to have, the breath that you're taking when you're reading it and that you're hearing in your head when you're looking at it is all determined by the line break and the space between stanzas, or not space between stanzas, or whatever the case may be. So I do think about it a lot, but I don't know. Yeah.
I want you to know that your grandmother at David's, invitation read to this group here once in this room.
Oh, it's so fun.
Amazing to see her here.
Yeah, she's a great reader.
Did Ruth read your poems? Did she encourage you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I really lucked out because she had, 6 grandkids, but like my grandma and I were really close, and I spent a lot of time with her. And she, right from the beginning, she taught me to read. So our link was very much with reading and writing, and she always was asking me to write poems and I can't remember the word. Memorize poems. Record poems. But so she was my mentor for my life. I had to, eventually break away a little bit, but she read my poems, and she was a great reader, and was constantly badgering me to write poems. And she was really good at getting people to write, which is not common. I know a lot of big name poets who just never encourage their children to write, and it's kind of strange. I mean, I kind of get it, I guess. You don't want kids to do their own thing or whatever, but Ruth was really encouraging about writing to me.
Well, there's Abigail and Phoebe.
And yeah, and exactly, Mom and Phoebe are just like, they're creative, compulsive, disordered people. They can't stop making. Yeah, and Mom was like that too. I mean, Mom was like, she still is. Like, art's just like way up here, and everything else is like, doesn't matter. Like, as long as you're writing or drawing or painting or something, it's like, jobs don't matter, it's like nothing else. Like, I found a balance, thank God, but.
Your mother was Abigail.
Yeah.
Was she the one who wrote a novel I read a long time ago where she called Middlebury Leadbetter?
Yeah, Leadbelly, yeah.
Leadbetter, she called it.
Leadbelly.
And lived by the dump.
Recipes from the dump.
Yeah.
Recipes from the dump.
You grew up by the stump dump.
By the stump dump, yes.
Yeah.
That was a great book.
Yeah, wasn't it?
I loved it.
Yeah, I'm
Classic.
really trying to get Mom to publish more.
You want to talk about the foundation and where you're at on that?
Totally. I mean, Ben and I, and also with the poet Chard Nord, who's now the poet laureate of Vermont and is coming to talk to you guys. Oh, he already came? Okay. So Chard's our other member, and it's just been going so well. It's taken a long time. There's a lot of family tension and grief going on, so it took a while to kind of be able to like start on the house. And but now we're in a really great place. The house, I've been working cleaning it out of Grandma's things, which is, you know, a lifetime of stuff. And going through her papers and organizing all her poems and things like that. There's so much great kind of artifacts and paraphernalia that we're keeping, you know, as like a relic to her there. We got the house approved as a National Historical Landmark, literary landmark. So that means that the house it's a landmark based on literary merit, which weirdly is like really rare, just to be just literary merit. Even though it is an old house, apparently it's not old enough. So that means that we fix it up to look at its best, you know, how Grandma had it, and it's really going to be kind of like a space for people to come see how she lived and how she wrote, and then stay there and be able to write poems, you know, in her study. And we just really want to support writers, just get people space to write and create and work together, and do classes and programming up in Goshen. And it's going to be a while before it's ready for people, because we need to raise a lot of money to you know, get it up to standard to have people come. But in the meantime, we're doing a lot of other work, everything we can. So we're doing like an event this summer, having some poets from New York come up that were a part of the Reader. We're doing the Reader, having them stay maybe at Blueberry Hill Inn or something like that nearby, and they can come during the day and see the house and work there. We're in the process of becoming a 501c3. Right now, we're fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, so that means we're kind of half of a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's going to be so special to have that place up in Vermont as like just a total haven for poets and artists to come. Just feel, I don't know, like a safe environment to write poems and share them with other people, and also have people from New York coming, so we have some sort of, I don't know, people from outside experiencing Vermont, and Vermont just getting to meet other people from other places.
Yes, but you New Yorkers just voted Bernie Sanders down.
I tried. I mean,
You tried? Thank you.
I tried.
Like, because Vermont would be an even better place if he was president.
I know. Well, it's not over yet.
That's right.
Yeah, there's still hope. Yay. I mean, really, we just need to make sure that Ted Cruz doesn't become president. And
will you let David know if there are some activities that are open to the public, and then?
yes, absolutely. You know what you can do is join our mailing list, because we're going to be, Ben and I are moving here in June to live in a caravan on the land. We're taking the leap. And just work on it full time. So it's really going to be having some massive changes. There's only so much we could do being in Brooklyn. We knew we have to be there, and I'm going to be doing a lot of gardening. So if anybody knows how to garden, please come help me.
Doesn't everybody know that?
It's all woods.
No.
Isn't it?
Huh?
It's all woods around the house.
Yeah, but there's a yard.
Park a car.
No, I know, it's very overgrown.
Do you want to talk about the poetry comics? What is that? What do you do? So they're your poems, I think.
Yeah, they're my poems. I mean, occasionally I'll do other people, but mostly it's mine. I talk about it so much, it's like kind of tiring. But yeah, let's see. Well, we were talking about space on the page, and I always, when I read comics and comic strips and a lot of things, I started to feel like there was a kinship to poetry in them. It kind of started with Peanuts, actually. There's so much poetry in Peanuts, and I don't know, just the way they progressed. And I started thinking, you know, why does it feel like there's something so similar in comics to poetry? And so I started really thinking, and also I loved making visual art, so I was like, any way that I could combine these two. It kind of came about because I was in a class with Ann Carson, and she was having us collaborate with people, and we'd have to really get creative about how we were going to collaborate. Because you don't really just want to write a poem together, and it's so boring and hard. So I would start drawing to people's poems and stuff like that, and people just loved it. They were like so excited. I think people, when they see images, they just get really excited, and it's just a whole new level of understanding, and people just react to the visual image so much more immediately than just the written word. So from there, I just started thinking about space on the page, how the image could be in a way like a form in a poem, like a line break, like the shape of a stanza, like a line of a poem itself, where the image doesn't explain the line of the poem, but rather complicates it as if it was another line of the poem. So, you know, reading them, it's very different experience because you have to look at it to experience it, unlike a poem, which you can just hear. It takes time to kind of absorb the words and the images all at once. It's going to be doing a lot of different work than your brain's going to be doing when you're reading a poem. You're doing a lot of imaginative work, coming up with what's happening in the poem, seeing things visually in your head. So I kind of love playing with that idea of like what we see when we read a poem and defying your expectations and making it even more crazy. So, I mean, I can pass it around. You can look at it. But
do it simultaneously, the writing and.
No, I usually I always have the lines of a poem already written, and I use them, and then from there I come up with the images. And it's really a lot of fun. A lot of people are doing it, and everybody who does it is really different. So it's a great way to talk about how poetry works. Get the kids excited. So yeah, I love doing it, and it's really a joy. It's just a total joy. Right.
So are you going to do another one? Are you going to keep doing it?
Oh yeah, I'm always doing it. Yeah. I do a lot of people ask for them for like magazines and stuff. So I do a lot of like. It's very. People want images a lot of times more than poems. So it's a good thing for my career. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Thank you so much.
You have some books to sign?
Yeah, I have a few.
You have some